Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, but today we are actually doing a response video to my friend Rob over at the Movie Vault, and if you haven't seen that video, check it out in the description down below. He's talking about each film from the year he was born all the way up to the present day in 2020. So I wanted to make a response video too, talking about my favorite film of each of those years, also with an honorable mention. But I'm not going to want to dive too much into the films themselves because I kind of want you to watch them, and it'll be a really long video if we talk about 28 films. I was born in 1992, so that's where we're going to be starting, is in 1992 we're going to go all the way up to 2020, and I'm going to be giving you an honorable mention for each year, but also telling you a little bit about each of the films and why they mean so much to me. So I hope you're excited. I want to know down in the comment section down below, or in a response video, if any of you have channels yourselves, please, let's just continue this, and I'm really excited to see your picks for each of the years that you were alive, and still are alive, hopefully. Anyway, let's not get into that morbid stuff. Let's actually talk about 1992 first, with my choice in Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola. Now, I re-watched this recently when I watched this during the Halloween season, and my God, I just fucking love this film. Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, they are such an amazing couple, and I love it. I don't know. This is a film that just, checks all the things off of my list. It's that gothic romantic, but it also has the sexual, things that are really actually present in the novel itself from Bram Stoker. And so I actually really love this adaptation. I think it's stylistically very, very pleasing. It's got all of these horror elements, but also that, like I said, the gothic elements to this romance that I really, really love. And in fact, you kind of feel bad for Gary Oldman, as Dracula. But, this is one of the films that, edged out my honorable mention, which is Reservoir Dogs. And Reservoir Dogs I really love, but I think Dracula is a film that I rewatch, more and more. And I've seen this film probably about 5 or 6 times in my life. And I think, each year it gets better and better. So my choice for 1992 is Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula. So if you haven't seen this movie, definitely sink your fangs into that one because it's fan-fucking-tastic. All right, now we're moving on to 1993, and this just goes all the way back to my childhood, maybe a few years after. I was 1 year old when this movie came out, so I watched it a few years after the fact when I was really young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, but I watched Jurassic Park. And Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park is absolutely my favorite film from 1993. It is just a fantastic production just when it comes to the stylistic nature of it. And there's so much great practical effects going on. The acting is fantastic. There's a lot of people in this. The kids in this movie are just super believable in the fact that they're running into dinosaurs and they're chasing them. It's just a film that I rewatch over and over and over again. I love this edition, the Steelbook right here, but it's just a fantastic film, and Jurassic Park really solidified a lot of people's love of dinosaurs back when they were younger. And I remember, like I said, a few years after this came out, when I was really into dinosaurs, I had all sorts of dinosaur phases. I had all the dinosaur action figures. I watched the dinosaur animated show, the Flintstones. There was so many things that I would do and watch related to Jurassic Park and dinosaurs. And so Jurassic Park still is one of the best films ever made, in my opinion, and I just really, really love this film, and Steven Spielberg did a fantastic job of making this production, and nothing tops this. None of the Jurassic Parks top this film, for sure, and everyone agrees with that. But the film that it edged out against the honorable mention is Dazed and Confused. I love Richard Linklater, and we'll talk about him a little bit later, but Dazed and Confused, another fantastic film that just barely lost to Jurassic Park. Didn't barely lose. It lost by a couple million years. All right, so 1994. Let's talk a little bit about the honorable mention before I jump in. Maybe I should switch that up. Talk about the honorable mention just like a second. So my honorable mention for 1994 is Shawshank Redemption. This is a movie that obviously, took years to get its cult following, but the movie it lost to is Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. And Pulp Fiction is just, what can I say about Pulp Fiction? The all-star cast, the insane dialogue that's involved with this. This was a lot of people's introduction to Quentin Tarantino. It wasn't my introduction. In fact, we'll talk a little bit later about my introduction to Quentin Tarantino. But Pulp Fiction stands the test of time with the amazing cast. You have Uma Thurman here, Bruce Willis, Christopher Walken, just to name a few people in this film, Sam Jackson, John Travolta. There's just a million people in this movie, and I know everyone who is watching this has probably seen this movie. If you haven't, certainly give yourself, do yourself a favor and watch this movie, because it's just a fantastic time. It'll even make you dance just a little bit, and also, maybe you might want a cheeseburger at the end of the day after this one. So let's move on from this to 1995. All right, so in 1995, the honorable mention that I have here is one that's a little bit controversial, but at the same time, I love the film. It's a movie that, makes me scream a certain word. I'm talking about Braveheart, and the word I'm talking about is freedom! The word I'm talking about is freedom, but I don't want to scream that at the camera. But the film that it lost to, and I already mentioned him a little bit earlier, it's actually from Richard Linklater, when I mentioned the director earlier. I'm talking about Before Sunrise. And this movie, okay, so I'm a romantic, and actually you can't see this, but above me are the Before Trilogy posters. In fact, the Before Trilogy is just something that I adore. But Before Sunrise, this is the introduction of Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke's kind of blossoming romance. It's that one night that they get together, that they don't even know each other, they're strangers, and there's just so many amazing, amazing things going on in this film. The record store scene really kind of, breaks my heart, and like, in a good way, right? And it's so fantastic, and I'm a sucker for romance, and you'll see this later on in my lists of other films that I'll be talking about. But Before Sunrise, I love Julie Delpy, and I love Ethan Hawke, and I want to take them to the grave with me. And so that's my choice for 1995. So let's actually move on from here to 1996. All right, moving on to 1996 is a honorable mention that is a horror film that I actually recently have really gotten a huge appreciation for, just because I actually have been really enjoying horror films, and that's Scream. That is Wes Craven's Scream. I love that film. It's an honorable mention, but the film it lost to is to a brother duo, and I'm talking about Ethan and Joel Coen's Fargo. Now, Fargo, I love that steelbook, by the way. The last time I watched this movie was in a theater, and I was engrossed in the story and the atmosphere of the film. It's comedic, it's dramatic, it's crazy. I love obviously the adaptations that would later come on from the television series, because it's based on true events, but the names and the characters were changed. That's where one of the first times I saw that title kind of in the front of a film. And this is obviously all fiction, by the way, if you didn't know that, it is. But these are really fantastic and really bizarre scenarios happening up in the crazy, crazy wilderness of Minnesota. There's a lot of really amazing things going on in this movie. Steve Buscemi, William H. Macy, Frances McDormand. It's a really fantastic time. If you haven't seen it, give yourself, do yourself a favor and check this one out, because it's just such a fun time. And you maybe want to get Arby's afterwards. Who knows? Moving on from here to 1997. All right, so we're moving on to 1997. Now, my honorable mention is definitely one of my favorite films of all time when it comes to this particular year, Good Will Hunting. But it actually lost to Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke. Now, if any of you are familiar with Studio Ghibli, this is my favorite Studio Ghibli film. This is my favorite Miyazaki film. And this is a film that just is a lot about environmentalism. It's dark. It's one of the more, I guess, adult-centered and, themed films that he would produce and he would direct and make. And it's just a beautiful film. It kind of just speaks to me, and every time I put it in, I love showcasing. If anyone is unfamiliar with Miyazaki in my life, I like to show this movie to them as a kind of an introduction. I mean, it's just one of those films that just constantly is in my mind. It's super colorful. It's super warm in my eyes, and it's also got a really good message. And so I really love Princess Mononoke, but what about you? What's your favorite film from 1997? I'm kind of curious. I don't think I've actually asked that in any of the things so far. But let's actually move on from here to 1998. All right, so moving on to 1998, my honorable mention is a movie that's really dark. It's American History X, but the movie that it lost to, in my eyes, is The Truman Show. And actually, I just talked about Peter Weir on a podcast recently. It'll be coming up very, very shortly. We talked about Peter Weir, me and my friend film blogger Sam. Hopefully that'll come out very, very soon. But we talked about Peter Weir. We talked about Truman Show a little bit as well. And The Truman Show, I remember watching this the first time, maybe in junior high, and really kind of not getting it at that time. But then I started, looking a little bit more into philosophical takes and started watching a little bit more films that, have this kind of a meaning that actually started ringing a lot more true to the world we live in today, because this is absolutely relevant to the amount of surveillance going on in the world today. But the Truman Show, it's just really interesting looking at that different dissection of private life versus public life, and really kind of focusing on somebody who might be unbeknownst to this person being watched. But Jim Carrey, this is one of his best performances, and if you haven't seen The Truman Show, definitely do yourself a favor and check this one out. So that's my favorite film from 1998. Let's move on here to 1999. All right, 1999 has a lot of good picks. In fact, the honorable mention that I'm going to be choosing is actually The Matrix, and I love the Wachowskis. And I really love the way this film was, and I remember all the trench coats and the slow motion and the animation in this film when it was coming out. I used to have the DVD with like that really weird black slip that you would have to pull it out, and it sat awkwardly on your shelf. But now my favorite film from the 1999 is a film that I actually have a lot of really good memories with, and that's Tarzan. I remember watching this movie in the theater with my cousins, and then immediately after going to McDonald's, getting Tarzan toys, getting a Happy Meal and getting Tarzan toys. But I remember being with my Uncle Joel, and I remember watching this with them, and then watching it over and over and over again, and really getting enchanted by, honestly, the soundtrack, the score of this. And you know exactly why, and that's Phil Collins. Phil Collins' music really sells this story for me. It's one of my favorite Disney movies of all time, and it just has a really special place in my heart, and you'll be in my heart. But anyway, that's my favorite film from 1999. What about yours? Tell me down in the comment section. I'm looking forward to hearing yours. So let's actually move on to the new millennium. Let's talk about 2000. We're moving on to the year 2000. So my honorable mention for 2000 is Gladiator, and I fucking love that movie. It's really, really great. It's one of the first like rated R films that I watched when I was young, and I remember loving it so much because I was super into history, and I still am, obviously, today, and I really love a lot of the action and adventure going on. I actually mentioned Braveheart earlier, another one of the films that I watched really early on in my childhood. Maybe scarred me a little bit, but at the same time, the film that it lost to, which we're doing a complete twist here, is a film that really means a lot more to me now, and it's actually Wong Kar-wai's In the Mood for Love. And this is a really fantastic film from Hong Kong, and I just absolutely adore this film, and there's just this want and desire going on between these neighbors who really are lost in, you know, their day-to-day kind of struggle with their own significant others. And it's just a beautiful film. It's beautifully shot. It's beautifully directed. In fact, a lot of it was kind of directed in secret, if you really know much about this film. But this movie is a romantic film that's almost like it's a romance that's never going to happen. And not to get too much into it, but it's a fantastic film that really kind of just makes me think over and over and over again of some things that, you know, may or may not meant to be. And it's a film that I think everyone should definitely check out sometime, because it's gorgeous. And anyway, In the Mood for Love, that's my pick for the year 2000. So let's actually move on from here to 2001. All right, so 2001, 2, and 3, I can see where maybe people might see where I might be going with this. I'm going to give my honorable mentions for each of these years first before I even talk about the films that I want to talk about. So for 2001, the honorable mention is Amélie. Love that French film. The second film from 2002, honorable mention, is City of God, a really fantastic Brazilian film. And then for 2003, my introduction to Tarantino, Kill Bill Volume 1 is my honorable mention. I absolutely love that film. But the films that all of those movies lost to, and I think you already understand where I'm going with this, is this. The Lord of the Rings trilogy. Fellowship of the Ring, 2001, The Two Towers in 2002, and The Return of the King in 2003. These are my favorite movies of all time. Hands down, it's got literally everything that I want in a film. It's got action, adventure, romance, comedy, amazing fantasy and drama, and everything I really want. And, you know, there's horror elements in it as well. Enough has been said about The Lord of the Rings. And it's just a film that I remember going to the theater each and every single time and watching each of these films and just being blown away by the special effects, the acting, because, oh my God, I love everybody in this. Every single member of the Fellowship, not even, like, you know, we're going to mention Saruman, Christopher Lee's character, but Ian McKellen as Gandalf. We have Billy Boyd as Pippin. We have Sean Astin as Samwise Gamgee. Elijah Wood as Frodo. We have Dominic as Merry. We have Sean Bean, who is my favorite character in the Fellowship of the Rings, as Boromir. We have Orlando Bloom as Legolas. We have John Rhys Davies as Gimli. We have Aragorn, who's played beautifully by Viggo Mortensen. And not to mention Cate Blanchett as Galadriel, Hugo Weaving as, Elrond. There's just an amazing, amazing cast here and an amazing, amazing story. And I don't think any trilogy comes even close to this one right here, because it's such a perfect thing for me, and it's something that'll never go away. And in fact, I'm actually getting the 4K editions of these coming out very, very shortly, the extended editions, and I cannot wait to own those. I haven't even gotten rid of, I have the DVD copies over there of the extended, and they look beautiful. And so yeah, these are my favorite films for 2001, 2002, 2003. But what about you? I want to know yours down in the comment section down below. Let's actually move on from here to 2004. All right, so moving on to 2004, my honorable mention is a really fantastic, another Jim Carrey film, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But that romance got edged out by my favorite romance of this year, and that is Before Sunset. Now, I've already talked about Before Sunrise, but this is actually my favorite film of the Richard Linklater's Before trilogy so far. This is the movie that's in between. You don't know if things are going to work out or not, right? This is 9 years later, and I don't think I've talked about the a crazy amount of time that from 1995 to 2004, and then later on in 2013, there's this actual 9-year gap in the story itself. And so you have to, kind of get the context clues of what happened, and they're catching up with each other. And it's a short and succinct film. It's only 80 minutes, and it's my favorite one of the three, because it's kind of like how life is. It's like there's always that, like, well, we don't really know what's going to happen next. And I don't know. It's just one of those films that has a beautiful, beautiful, dialogue and interaction between Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke. And like I said earlier, this would be my second favorite trilogy other than Lord of the Rings. So this is a pretty obvious pick for me. So Before Sunset is my second favorite, or is my favorite film of 2004. And you should definitely check out this trilogy because it's worth your time. All right, we're moving on to 2005. And the film that lost to the film that I chose is a biopic called Walk the Line with Joaquin Phoenix about Johnny Cash. Love that film. Love it to death, and I love it more and more every time I see it. But the film that it lost to is my favorite Batman film of the Nolan trilogy, and it's actually Batman Begins. And I know that's controversial for a lot of people, but I don't know. I just really love this origin story, and I think Christopher Nolan did a really fantastic job of kind of getting Christian Bale to become Batman. I think Christian Bale might be the best Bruce Wayne. I would say Michael Keaton would be the best Batman, obviously. But besides that, though, Batman Begins is just a really great introduction to this story, to this trilogy that would, be legendary, obviously, later on. And I don't know. I think it's a really wonderful start, and I think it's a fantastic story that I like revisiting over and over again. And it honestly kind of tells me of the time period that this came out in, and it definitely feels like it came out, during a shift in cinema. So yeah, my 2005 pick is Batman Begins, but what about yours? Tell me down in the comment section down below. I'm looking forward to hearing it. All right, so we're moving on to 2006, and the honorable mention that I have here is a really, really fantastic one. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Children of Men. And I love that film. It's a really great British film, and it'll be an emotional journey for you. But speaking of emotional journeys, the one that it lost to, the one that it beat out for me, is the film that I love to death. In fact, I have the poster over there. I've talked about it multiple times on the channel. I watched it for Halloween this year, like I do every year. Pan's Labyrinth. Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth. I can never say his Guillermo. But anyway, regardless, this is an immaculate film. This is a film that is just so beautiful. It's so melancholic. It always touches my heart. I always cry when I watch this movie. And honestly, I cannot wait to show more people this film. But this is actually my favorite Del Toro film. And it's just a heartbreaking story. It's a story about imagination, about escapism. It's just got a lot of things in it. And it's got a lot of historical context as well. And it's just beautifully made. And also the Javier Navarrete score. Fucking give me the vinyl already. Somebody tell me, give me the vinyl. Okay, 2006, Pan's Labyrinth. Let's move on from here to 2007. All right, so 2007, I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to give you my honorable mention, and I'm going to pick 2 films. So there's 3 films that I'm going to be talking about. The honorable mention here is Ethan and Joel Coen's No Country for Old Men. This was a really stacked year for films that I'm going to be talking about. But yes, No Country for Old Men, honorable mention. The films that it lost to are 2 films that I just can't get enough of, and both of them I have to have different moods for. The first one I'll mention is a film that really is underappreciated in my opinion. That's The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, with Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. This film is just mind-blowing. The soundtrack and the score of this film, Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, is just something that just draws you in. It's a really slowly paced story that really kind of just draws you in to the atmosphere. It's beautifully shot, and it's just wonderfully made. This movie deserves a lot more attention. But the other film that I chose for this particular year is the film that is probably my favorite of P.T. Anderson's films, There Will Be Blood. This is a movie with Daniel Day-Lewis that just sold me on the reason like he's one of the best actors like of all time. And Daniel Day-Lewis's character drinks a lot of milkshakes, I tell you what. But if you haven't seen There Will Be Blood, another slow-paced film that really kind of drags you along with a really wonderful score as well. And, you know, both of these films in particular kind of just pull you in and, you know, really make you want more. I don't know about you, but what about you? What are your choices for 2007? Those are my 2 choices. I know I cheated there, but I just love the films equally, just as much. So let's move on from here to 2008. All right, so moving on to 2008, my honorable mention is a really fantastic Ethan and Joel Coen production once again, Burn After Reading. I love that film. I love laughing at it. It's such an insane concept. J.K. Simmons, Brad Pitt, George Clooney. We got just a lot of wonderful people in it. John Malkovich is in it as well. And then Frances McDormand. And then, yeah, it's just a fantastic film. But the film that it lost to is a film that I've talked about a lot on the channel. In fact, I did an unboxing for this particular box I'm about to show you. It's one that you already know that I've chosen. It's In Bruges. And In Bruges with Ray Fiennes, Brendan Gleeson, and Colin Farrell. 3 of my favorite people of all time. And this, Martin McDonagh just crafted one of my favorite films ever made. In fact, I've watched this probably 12 to 15 times, and I've shown a lot of people this movie. And this movie deserves a lot more attention. It's beautiful. It's got black comedy involved with it. It's very dark and melancholic, but those are kind of all the ingredients for what I love in a film. In fact, outside of Lord of the Rings, this is my favorite film. And I love it so much, and this is a beautiful copy from Second Sight. I love In Bruges, and I hope you do too. It's like a fucking fairy tale. All right, let's move on from here to 2009. All right, moving on to 2009, my honorable mention here is a romance that I really enjoy, 500 Days of Summer. But the film that it lost to is a film directed by Quentin Tarantino, our second in this list. It's Inglourious Basterds. I love this film. It's, revisionist history at its finest. It's got all these different languages. One of the first films that I remember watching with, different languages and really kind of paying attention to every little detail. I've seen this movie a lot, but just, I don't know. I love all the little details in German, Italian, broken English from Brad Pitt. He's just a really funny character in this film. He's very dim-witted. But everything about this movie is just so much fun. And also, this is the film that really sold me, especially Christoph Waltz's character. I think he's the one who steals the show in this film the most. But, obviously with the Tarantino film, there's a million people in this movie that really kind of showcase how wonderful it is. And I love the ending of it so much. And, it really just shows that revisionist side of history that we all wanted. And it's just a really fun film. It's bloody, it's comedic, it's dramatic, it's wonderful. And if you haven't seen Inglourious Basterds, definitely do yourself a favor and check it out. So let's actually move on from here to 2010. All right, so we're moving on to 2010. So 2010 is a film that's going to turn a lot of people's heads, and a lot of people are going to turn off this video once I tell you what my favorite film is. But the film that it lost, or the film that's honorable mention, is Inception by Christopher Nolan. I really enjoy that film, but the film that lost to is Adam McKay's The Other Guys, with Will Ferrell, Mark Wahlberg, Sam Jackson, Dwayne Johnson, Michael Keaton. That's who's steals this movie. this is a movie I quote all the fucking time with my friends, and it's a movie that is definitely probably one of the worst films I've mentioned when it comes to like if we're talking about objective films, this is not one of those objective films. This is a super subjective film for me. I just really enjoy it. I quote it all the time, and I always try to aim for the bushes. I always like to have whisper fights with my friends. If you haven't seen the other guys, you may or may not like it, but it definitely hits all the check marks for me in a film that is just absolutely super silly, and it's worth your time, in my opinion. But yeah, what about you? What's your favorite film from 2010? Let's move on to 2011. All right, so moving on to 2011, my honorable mention is also kind of comedic, but is also in a horror film, The Cabin in the Woods. I really enjoy that film, and especially as somebody who's really enjoying horror. But recently, I switched it, to my favorite film from this year, and that is Drive. Ryan Gosling in this particular film is just, I don't know. He lacks a lot of dialogue and emotion because there's something going on in his life. But I don't know. There's something about this film when it comes to the score, when it comes to the visual nature of the film, kind of that neo-noir that we would get from this film is just really fantastic. And I just remember the last time I watched this was actually earlier on this year before all the lockdown. I watched it in my local independent cinema theaters. That was actually the first time I watched it on a theater, because I didn't watch it when it was in theaters initially during its first run. But I just really enjoy this movie. It's a movie that just, sticks with you. And there's a lot of really crazy scenes in it, and it's a fantastic one. And so you should check out Drive if you haven't. And yeah. Let's moving on from there to 2012. All right, so moving on to 2012, my honorable mention is actually one of my favorite James Bond films. In fact, I really didn't even mention it when I was talking earlier about 2008. I should have mentioned Casino Royale, because that's like my favorite Bond film. But my second favorite Bond film is Skyfall, which is my honorable mention. But it lost to this film, which is going to be, a lot of people are going to be like, why did it lose to this film that I'm talking about? I'm talking about The Avengers. Now, this is, so I watched all the films prior to this, and I've seen all the ones after as well, but this is the movie I watched 5 times in theaters. I watched Skyfall about 3 times, but I watched this one 5 times, just because of how much fun I had it. Joss Whedon, I love. I love Joss Whedon so much because I grew up watching Buffy and Angel, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, and I also, watched Firefly as well, but I really enjoy Joss Whedon's creations and, the stuff that he writes. And now he directs this one. And this was the first time that I was sold on superhero films. And I don't like superhero films maybe as much as I did back in 2012, but this is a film that I really enjoyed, and I'm reminded of it. In fact, this movie could be switched out for Skyfall if you really wanted to. But this is a movie I just remember having a lot of fond memories with. And so, yeah, at the moment it's The Avengers, but it could be something completely different, in a couple years. So what about you? What's your favorite film from 2012? All right, moving on to 2013. A film that I really enjoy by Denis Villeneuve is Prisoners, and that's my honorable mention. But the film it lost to is another Ethan and Joel Coen film, one that really kind of cracks you up, but also makes you really sad. It's 2013's Inside Llewyn Davis, and there's that cat, and there's a guitar. I don't know. Something about this movie just speaks a lot of volumes. I really love, like I mentioned a little bit earlier with Walk the Line, this movie really kind of dives into the folk scene that was happening at the time. This is a fictional story, but Oscar Isaac plays a really amazing character in Llewyn Davis, and he's really just trying to break into the scene, trying to make his way through all these different settings, and trying to break into something that could be a little bit better. But I don't know, something about this movie just, like I said, it warms your heart. It also breaks your heart as well. It's got a lot of really fantastic scenes in it, and it's a movie that I've revisited multiple times, and it's just a fun one to watch. And Coen Brother films, I love them because they're dramatic and they're also comedic at the same time, and it has a really intriguing story. So if you haven't seen Inside Llewyn Davis, you should certainly check it out, because if you like music, you also really love this one. So yeah, it's a great one. Moving on from here to 2014. All right, so 2014, both silly films that I chose here. My honorable mention is Grand Budapest Hotel, which is actually my favorite Wes Anderson film. And that was the Wes Anderson film that really broke me into watching the older films from him, like Rushmore. I remember watching The Life Aquatic when it was in theaters years and years ago. Did not get it when I was young, but now I do, and I love it. But the film that it lost to is a New Zealand film that I've watched multiple times. It's What We Do in the Shadows. Taika Waititi. I don't know. I love this guy. And there he is right there. There's Taika. But, you know, this is a film that I've watched, like I said, multiple times with my best friend. I've shown it to a lot of people, and every single time they watch it, they enjoy it. They have no idea what to expect. It's a vampire mockumentary, very much in the style of like The Office or, you know, Flight of the Conchords, and maybe some other British shows that you would see as well. But, you know, this is a really, really fun film. I love vampires, always have. I talked about Dracula earlier. But, you know, this is a film that is really silly, kind of plays on all the tropes of it. And there's also an amazing, you know, series on Hulu right now, What We Do in the Shadows, that I really, really love as well. That's equally as good as this film. So you should check this one out. It's one that's not talked about too often when it comes to their favorites of this particular year. So let's actually move on from here to 2015. All right, so moving on to 2015, my honorable mention is a Tarantino film. It's actually one of my favorite ones of his, and that's The Hateful Eight. And I don't know, I love something I love about is the Ennio Morricone score, but also just the cast and crew and, you know, the setting. But the film that it lost to is a film that I've talked about a lot, and it is The Witch. And Robert Eggers' directorial debut, the film that I just I remember going to the theater and, you know, being really terrified because I was by myself in the theater. The sound design just like kind of drew me in. And yeah, I don't know. I talked about The Witch a lot. In fact, on the corner over there, I have the screenplay from A24. But this is a really fantastic film. It's not for everybody, and I completely understand that. But I did talk about this actually recently on a podcast, so hopefully I can make that announcement where I go a little bit more in depth with this film. But The Witch, would thou like to live deliciously? Because I would. All right, we're moving on to 2016. My honorable mention is actually the Best Picture winner of that year, and it's still struck me to this day, and it's Moonlight. And I really love that film, and I remember my theater experiencing just bawling my eyes out every time I watched it. But the film that I choose now, just on rewatchability and stuff that I am now to this day, is The Nice Guys with Ryan Gosling and Russell Crowe. This movie is just such a fun time, and I love Shane Black and his writing. And I think this is a really good detective, like neo-noir kind of, you know, comedy that happens like where you would have Lethal Weapon, right? You know, same guy who made that, or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. It's just a good continuation. I think this is Shane Black's bread and butter. And The Nice Guy is just a really fantastic, really witty film, and it's just really fun kind of going through Hollywood and seeing these really buffoonish detectives and, you know, maybe a bounty hunter trying to figure out what's going on in their lives. So anyway, check out The Nice Guys if you haven't seen it. It's a really fun time, and you'll be laughing your ass off. All right, we're moving on to 2017, and my favorite film from 2017, my honorable mention, is another Del Toro film, Shape of Water, which I really loved, and it won Best Picture that year. But the film that I think deserved that win was Call Me By Your Name. Luca Guadagnino. Oh, God, this movie, another film that just makes me cry. I've seen it probably 5 or 6 times now. I have the score. I have the book. It's a movie that is just, it's heartbreaking. It's got Sufjan Stevens, amazing score. The performances in this, Armie Hammer, Timothée Chalamet, it's just this summer romance that just really speaks to me, and I love it. And it's a film that, you know, like I said, makes me cry every single time. It's a very emotional journey for me every time I watch it, and I don't know, I love this film, and I hope you do too, but this is my favorite film from 2017. All right, now we're moving on to 2018, and the film that lost out to the film that I'm choosing, they're both kind of horror films. So 2018, I would say my honorable mention is Hereditary, very much like The Witch, in a very different way. I love that film. But the film that it lost to is a science fiction horror film with Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac, actually, Annihilation. This is really wonderful. I remember my theater experience and just gripping my seat and looking over at my friend, especially during the bear scenes. Fuck. This movie it's 5 women going out into the wilderness in kind of the Everglades area. Like I said, it's a science fiction film where, you know, there's this anomaly happening where the shimmer is kind of consuming all life around it. You know, the flora and fauna around it are transforming, and it really kind of just shows that science fiction nature of like, oh, the unknown is just terrifying, and especially to human, you know, senses and whatnot. But if you haven't seen Annihilation, also read the book by Vandermeer. Really fantastic. There's a book series. But Annihilation, fantastic film, visually stunning, really great casts, horrifying. It's one of the best sci-fi films And I don't even think I mentioned how much I love Alex Garland for writing and directing this. I love Alex Garland's work quite a bit. And so, yeah, check out Annihilation if you haven't. So let's move on here to 2019. All right, so for 2019, where the honorable mention is the film that I remember right before I went to China watching this and just really kind of losing it. And that's The Farewell. I really love that film, but the film it lost to is a recent film that I've finally watched, and I've actually seen it twice now. It's a film that just will not escape my memory, and that is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And this is a film that just stays with you. Another one of those romances that it's very much, I mean, I guess in a similar way to like In the Mood for Love is, in a sense that, you know, there's all this wanting and desire going on in the film. And it's not really that typical film that you would see where things kind of end up okay and you don't really know. But if you haven't checked out Portrait of a Lady on Fire, get the Criterion edition of this movie. It's fucking beautiful. The story is beautiful. It's also heartbreaking. And yeah, do yourself a favor and check this one out. So let's actually move on from here to the last year, 2020. This is a year that I haven't seen really anything, unfortunately. 2020, like I said, it's been a weird year, so my honorable mention is going to be strange because it's definitely probably not going to be my honorable mention in, you know, years from now when I watch some of the 2020 films that I've missed. But my honorable mention is Onward, the Disney movie. But like I said, I haven't seen really much. So the favorite film of this year is The Invisible Man. And I just really, really love this film. It's a really great adaptation of, you know, a source material, kind of modernizing it and making it its own thing. And I really, really love Elizabeth Moss in this film. And it just really showcases how wonderful of an actress she is. I mean, obviously, if you've seen The Handmaid's Tale or any of her other past works, you already know she's an amazing actress. But this movie was really fantastic, and it's certainly worth your time. But yeah, those are my favorite films from 1992 to 2020, the years I was born. But what about you? Put me down in the comment section down below. What are your favorite films from each of these years or your birth years? You know, you don't have to tell me your age or anything like that, but I want to know. I'm kind of curious. What do you think of my picks? Are some of them silly? Are some of them right on the nose? But thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was a little bit longer than I wanted it to be, but thank you so much for sticking around and checking it out. Much love. Give this a like, comment down below, share this video, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'm not joking around.